The little bell so you're notified when we release new video. Dang it, I almost had it that time.
Hey guys, welcome back to our channel. We're the CineChix. I'm Christina.
And I'm Jen. And today we are talking about The Devil All the Time, which just released on Netflix. It's a movie that takes place in the 1950s and 60s.
All the main characters at some point cross paths, but you also see their journeys separately.
I really liked this movie. I wasn't sure what to expect because the trailers don't really give anything away, and it's got a fantastic cast. It's got Robert Pattinson, Tom Holland, Sebastian Stan. It's got Harry Melling. It has Haley Bennett, Bill Skarsgård. So many people, and I know that I'm missing people, and I'm sorry, but it's a fantastic cast. I didn't really have that many issues with the movie, which is rare for me. As you know, I have a lot of opinions, guys. What'd you think?
I completely agree with you. I like the way that they handled all those cast members.
Yeah.
Like, every character feels fleshed out. Mm-hmm. Like, everybody got the proper amount of attention, mm-hmm. and you could understand everybody's motives, even though there were so many people.
It's not a movie that you could watch while doing other things. You need to be able to be sitting and paying attention, because if you're distracted, you'll miss things. And there's so many storylines going on, but at the same time, if you're paying attention, it's easy to follow. This movie reminded me a lot of The Place Beyond the Pines in the fact that it was kind of a slower movie. It takes its time, but not in a boring, slow, like, what is happening? Like, sometimes you'll watch a really long movie and you can feel the time dragging. And this movie, I was invested the entire time. There wasn't a moment that I was like, oh my gosh, when is this going to be over? When are we getting to the point of this movie? Because the point of the movie it doesn't change, but like, it's constantly moving. It's not like you're waiting for one thing to happen. But yeah, this movie reminded me of The Place Beyond the Pines also because of the time frame or the timeline that it was in, and how it takes place over multiple generations, and how you see the life of the fathers first, and then you see how their lives impacted their sons' lives. And so we see Tom Holland's dad and what happens with him, and then we see how he handles life, and we see this girl Eleanor and what happened to her parents, and then how she handles life. And it was just the way they did it was really well done.
Even though the movie took place in the 50s and 60s, it was, I wouldn't say hard to tell, but the small town feel of it made it feel like it was a lot earlier, like the 1920s and 30s.
You didn't see any technology. The only thing that you saw that could really age the film was like the cars.
Yeah.
And what's really interesting is the costume designer actually talked about how she hated working on this film, not because it was a bad movie, but because the costumes, she would get them authentically from eBay, like that were from the 1950s and the 1960s. But when the characters are wearing them, they look like they could be walking around today, because men's fashion hasn't really changed that much. So now, if you haven't seen the movie yet, you might want to stop the video now, because we're about to get into some spoilers.
Danger!
In terms of themes, what are one of the main themes that stuck out to you?
I think one of the main themes, kind of like what I mentioned before, is how your parents' lives affect the children. Whether you have the parent in your life the whole time or whether you lose a parent early on, that is going to impact you. And this movie really shows the different types of impact. Arvin lost his mother to cancer early on, and right before the mother died, the dad killed the family dog as a sacrifice, trying to get God to save his wife. And obviously that didn't work, and she died, and then he ends up killing himself. One of the last good memories that Arvin has of his dad is his dad telling him, you need to stand up for yourself. And he goes to this parking lot where there were a couple of guys who were talking about his wife or something, and he goes and beats the crap out of them and shows his son, this is how you handle things. And that was the last actual memory he really had of his dad. So of course that's what he took into life moving forward, and he always would go to violence to solve his problems. And later on we see, whenever he's trying to protect his adopted stepsister Eleonora, he beats the crap out of the boys that are picking on her. Throughout the whole movie, you see him turning to violence until the very end, whenever he's made peace and he buries the bones of his dog because nobody wanted to touch it and it was like rotting. So he finally buries that, and after he does that, you can kind of tell that he had made peace with himself, and he buries the gun along with it, kind of like, okay, I'm done cleaning up my father's mess, I'm done following my father. At the end of the movie, we see Arvin once again hitchhiking, which I'm not so sure I would hitchhike again after almost getting
probably
killed.
not.
But he gets picked up by like this hippie, and the dude he's like, where are you going? So he was going somewhere like far. Then you see Arvin, he's like, I don't really know if I wanted to go there. And he turns back, like looking behind him. And I feel like that was so, like the subtlety of that and like the meaning of him, like kind of looking behind him, being like leaving his past behind him and not going back. And like this was like him actually moving forward with his life. And he's like falling asleep. He's like, I really don't want to like fall asleep next to a stranger. But he's thinking about like what his future could be. He's like, maybe I'll get married, start a family of my own, or, you know, this was about the time of the Vietnam War. And he's like, maybe I should follow my father's footsteps and join the war, join the army. And he's just kind of going through what could be happening all this time while he's like falling asleep. And this whole scene, I was so uneasy. And I'm not sure if it's because of the last time he got picked up, but then when his eyes close and he like falls asleep, the movie ends. And you're left wondering, what was his future? What did he decide? Does he get a happy ending? Does he get caught? Does he join the army and die in the war and follows his father's footsteps even more? Or does the creepy dude that picked him up kill him? I don't know. I'd like to think that he has a happier ending, but I kind of feel like he followed his father's footsteps and joined the army if he didn't get killed in the car.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And to also talk about his adoptive stepsister, Lenora, she had even less time with her parents and ended up being very similar to her mother.
Yeah.
Her mother fell in love with an extremist reverend who ends up killing her to somehow prove that God can bring the dead back.
Okay, I just needed to ask you this. What the fuck was he trying to do?
The only clue to what his thought process was when he got bit by the spider and was in the closet for 14 days.
Right. But like,
and then then the narrator or whatever said that God showed him something that for some reason he thought, okay, God wants me to take my wife into the woods and kill her, and then he's going to bring her back to life.
Like immediately, it wasn't even like he was like, dude, I was like, what is he doing? And then he like immediately is like, okay, bring her back. And I'm like, what? Like, did you really think that was going to work? And, like, if you did really think that was going to work, like, what?
But, yeah, so she gets killed when Lenora's, like, 6 months old or something.
Yeah, she was a baby.
Funny enough, the same thing that happened with her mother, falling head over heels for this reverend, she did the same exact thing with Robert Pattinson's character, who is the new reverend and extremist
and pedophile. That whole thing like upset me so much because of how the reverend handles the situation, because he uses his place of power against her and like tries to say like, oh, you know, this is what God would want, and like, oh, we're just spending time with God while you're in my car blowing me. Like, very messed up things that unfortunately do happen. And then whenever she is pregnant, he's like, oh, how could I be the father? Because, you know, we've only spent time with God. I was actually like livid in that moment. She trusted him. She's like, okay, well, he said I need to get rid of it. She's like, okay, well, I'm gonna commit suicide. And then in the last moment, she realizes that what he said was a lie, that her grandmother would still accept her, and she wasn't gonna kill herself, but
she slipped
and
killed herself by accident. While her case is a bit more extreme, her mother went down the same path. Yeah. It's just crazy that Arvin's father died when he was maybe 10, 11, and then Lenore's mother gets murdered by her father when she's like 6 months old, and both their pasts are so similar. Yeah. To their parents. Going back to your religious point, I think that's also another theme. Mm-hmm. Extreme religion seems to be poured all over. Yes, yeah. Flooding the whole entire movie. It's not completely about that. It's part of it. That's one of the main themes, how extreme religion really affected all of them.
Arvin, his father fought in the war and then had to kill a fellow soldier, and that really stuck with him, and the soldier was hanging on a cross. It took him years to find religion again, and then once he met his wife, he wrote to his mother saying, you know, I found a reason to start praying again. Arvin saw that, but then he saw how his father went from like being normal, but then when his wife got sick, we saw how he took to religion in an extreme and unhealthy way when he tried to sacrifice his dog and forcing his child down to kneel in front of this homemade cross to like all like yell
until it got dark outside, like all day,
and like yell prayers to like heal his mother. So then, of course, that turned Arvin away from religion, which, I mean,
yeah,
rightfully so. And he still had to go to church with his grandmother.
She was normal, but her son, who didn't have religion really, turned into an extremist towards the end. And then Arvin isn't into religion at all. And then Lenore is borderline extremist.
Right. And then I feel like she got more extreme because of her relationship with the preacher. Later on in the film, when the Reverend is talking to Arvin, and Arvin has realized that what the Reverend did and that she was pregnant with his child, and he's done this to other girls, and he was currently doing it to other girls. The Reverend realizes
that he's talking about him.
And he's like, his entire demeanor changes, like, because he has like the typical high Reverend voice, and it immediately like drops, and his like facade changes, and it's just very interesting to see.
He knew that eventually someone was going to bring it up, because one of the sermons that they made a point to show, because they don't show a lot of his sermons.
Right.
The one they made a point to show had everything to do with delusional women.
I am so sick of the extremists in religion and the extremists trying to like say that something is the word of God when it's not, and I feel like that's happening a lot today.
The extremism of Arvin's father turned Arvin away from God completely. The extremism of that town anyways, like people who went to that church was always trying to oppress the Reverend and things like that,
and they turned a blind eye on what's happening,
and that put Lenore in a vulnerable place to end up being raped by the Reverend.
Like him saying that, you know, oh well, we were just spending time with God, like you clearly weren't. That is not what you're supposed to be doing. It's interesting because in the Bible, the word homosexual was not in the Bible whenever it was in Hebrew and when it was in like the other original languages. The word that was used actually meant pedophile. And it was specifically talking to people in power to not use their power against other people. And it was talking about like reverends not being pedophiles. And so I think that it's very interesting
that's the biggest problem in the church today, is
even
reverends
though that's what
using their power to prey on young boys and girls.
Yeah. I loved this movie, but I'm probably never going to watch it again. Not because it wasn't good, but because even though I wasn't depressed watching it and I didn't actually cry watching it, it's just one of those movies that it puts you in a place that you don't necessarily want to like
if you already know it's going to put you there, no, you're not going to be like, that's what I want to do with my Saturday night. No one in this movie got a happy ending. Everybody's stories were pretty tragic.
Yeah.
Like, everybody's stories was tragic.
It's definitely one of those movies that just like makes you wonder, and I love those movies that you continue to think on after the movie ends and all the different options of what could happen. And it's one of those movies that it was beautiful, well done, acting was amazing, the music,
everything about it is excellent.
I really want to now read the book. I feel like it would be a great read. I'm sure that would just like add like a lot more. I'm sure it has a lot more context.
Yeah.
If you picked out any other themes that we missed, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Write them down below. Let us know if you liked the movie, if you didn't like it. We always want to hear your opinion. Make sure that you like, comment, subscribe. Make sure you click that bell so you're notified when we drop new videos.
Until next time, guys. Bye.
Bye.